we're going to get into a session here while we're all being mic'd up on survivorship issues. And I know many of you in the room work with cancer patients and cancer survivors, so you know all of this. But the thing that this session is going to try and point out is the different needs for different cancer patients and survivors. That it's not one size fits all. And you're going to meet and hear from three wonderful women who are doing their bit in different areas to try and improve the lot of cancer patients and survivors. So the first person we're going to hear from is Francoise Meunier, who is a member of the Belgian Royal Academy of Medicine, no less. Now, Francoise is a legend, of course, because she is leading this Right to Be Forgotten campaign in different member states. It's been very much a one-woman campaign with a lot of support from many organisations, including my own, the European Cancer Organisation. But let's hear from Francoise, first of all, about the work she's been doing on trying to prevent financial discrimination for cancer survivors. Francoise.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Pernilla for inviting me to this very interesting and important meeting. It's a pleasure for me to speak to you about a topic very close to my heart. As a background, I am a medical oncologist, and for almost 50 years, next year it's going to be 50 years that I have been graduated as a medical doctor, I decided to fight against cancer. And so I have always been working in trying to improve the survival and the quality of life of patients with cancer throughout my academic career. But at the end, as I am officially retired, but I decide to dedicate the last part of my professional activities. Even if you are retired, you still have a brain and you can use your brain. And I decided to work exclusively on one topic, which is ending the financial discrimination against cancer survivors. This is a narrow topic, but I think if we want to find an adequate solution, it's better to target specific topic with specific solution instead of mixing every issue, because it's true that cancer patients face a lot of issues. If I can have my slides, please. Well, it doesn't matter. I can speak like this. And indeed, there are today in Europe about 20 million of people living with cancer, and a lot of them are going to survive, hopefully. As I said before, when I was graduated in 1974, announcing to a patient a diagnosis of cancer was a death sentence. But it is no longer a death sentence. Patients should not have to pay twice and should not have been penalized after they have gone through an ordeal when we announce them the diagnosis of cancer. And indeed, in survivorship issue, as I just explained, there are many issues, but I will focus on the right to be forgotten. There is physical and medical, long-term toxicity, long-term side effects, psychological effect, but also societal effect. And most of the time, the society does not realize that when a patient is cured of cancer, when we, medical doctor, we tell to a patient, live your life, you are cured, we don't need to do CT scan and PET scan and MRI every 6 months and so on. There comes problem And that is the financial discrimination. To get a loan, mortgage, they want to buy a home, they want to buy a company or to return to work. And there they face problem for access to financial services because the society did not move their mind, and the bank and insurance are out of the reality faced by cancer survivors to whom we say that they are cured. The technical problem is still there. I was very much inspired by the French situation. In 2016, I am Belgian, I am not French, but I speak French. In 2016, in France, they voted what we call the right to be forgotten law, which is the droit à l'oubli. And this means, perhaps we get it? No. This means that after a certain period, 5 years. Initially, it was 10 years, but it has now been changed from 10 years delay, which is extremely long. When you say 5 years after the end of treatment, you are cured, why should they wait for 10 years? Now it's 5 years. That either you should not have to declare your cancer because when you need a loan, you need an insurance. I know that in Sweden it's not legally, it's not obligatory to have an insurance for your loan. But in many countries like France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, when you go to a bank to get a loan, you need an insurance to cover your loan. And there, an insurance company will ask you a medical questionnaire where have you had surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy. They want to evaluate the risk. Of course, an insurance company is not philanthropic. They want to know what do they insure. And so you have to fill a questionnaire and you can never lie to an insurance company. So that is the last things to do. And so the fact that there was this legal framework, is it working now? Yes. The definition is no discrimination, either 5 years to 10 years, depend on the country. And 5 years for children, it used to be up to 20-year-old, and now they have decreased to 18 years. The beauty of the system in France also is that they have a convention which is to insure persons who have an increased risk of health, that's called AERAS, with a list of exceptions because there are cancer with much better prognosis. And for example, in this list of exceptions, small thyroid cancer, small testis cancer, there are a list, 3-page list, so it's a lot. It's 30 different diseases for which the delay is not 10 years, it's not 5 years, it's 2 years, or 1 year, or 3 years. So this was really inspiring. And I said to myself, if it's work in France, it should work for all European citizens who got cancer and who got survivorship. Because it's not normal, we are living in the EU, that there is such inequality, discrimination among all cancer survivors throughout Europe. And that's why I decided since 2014 to work on this topic exclusively on the right to be forgotten throughout EU. And for that, I worked member state by member states, but also on an European level through the Commission, the Parliament, because I think that the more countries we have who have adopted the law, the easier it will be to convince and to get an European legal framework on the right to be forgotten. As you can see here, France started in 2016, then it was Belgium in 18, then Netherlands in 20, Portugal in 22, Romania in July 22, and Spain last June. So these are the member states. Of course, there are, and this is with legal legislation at the member state level. There are some communality. The country, the member state, do not have to reinvent the wheel. We know what is functioning since 2016, and as I said, there is not a single insurance company who got bankruptcy because of this right to be forgotten. So it's work. Don't reinvent the wheel, try to mimic the situation. And it's how we succeed to get the 6 countries having a legislation. There are some general principles, the same basis, but with some country specificity which are totally normal. For example, the cost of housing is different in Luxembourg than in Amsterdam or in Paris. And so the maximum amount that the cancer survivor can access to may differ from country to country, which is totally acceptable. But the principle of 5 years, no medical questionnaire, or not be penalized because you had cancer 6 years ago are really important. What about other EU countries? We are very happy that it's already 6 countries, but also in other countries, there is a code of conduct already. So the country who decide to put something in the legislation which is not really binding, but it's better than nothing, and it's existing in Luxembourg, in Ireland, in Greece, in Denmark, and in Finland. And the legislation, a real legislation, is in preparation in Slovenia, Italy, Malta, and Cyprus. So slowly we are progressing, which is a very good way. We were helped, of course, by the European Commission, because there we succeed to ask for a code of conduct, as Christine Chaumienne explained to you, and the Cancer Mission also has specificity on cancer survivor and financial discrimination, and the right to be forgotten is written in the text of the Cancer Mission. Lastly, in December last year, we succeed to introduce amendments in the discussion of the revision of the Consumer Credit Directive. And those amendments have been taken. That means that we now have a Consumer Credit Directive which needs to be implemented. It's only in directive, it's not a regulation. That means that each member state have to adapt their directive to their national legislation, but yet the right to be forgotten has been introduced in the Consumer Credit Directive. It's only the Consumer Credit Directive. It's not yet for mortgage and loans, but next year, after the election of the new parliament, they will revise the mortgage directive. And that is going to be extremely important as well, to incorporate the right to be forgotten in the mortgage directive. After all, my philosophy is that when you announce, as I said at the beginning, a cancer diagnosis to a patient, it's a tremendous thunderstorm. It's a fantastic shock for the patient and the family. And then throughout the treatment, he has to go through everything. It's really heavy to admit to get all of this treatment. But at the end of the path, there is the sun at the end, as I show in that graphic. And this end of the path shows that we need innovative solution to appropriate rehabilitation with full reintegration into the society without discrimination. For that, we need to collect long-term data to harmonize the national cancer registry at the EU level, able to give data and to show actual real data to insurance company and to bank, and also to end up with an harmonized legal framework. And what I plead is to get finally at the end an EU regulation to protect all cancer survivors throughout Europe. I take this opportunity to inform you that I am organizing a high-level conference on 15 February in Brussels in the presence of Stella Kyriakides and Meret McInnes, the 2 commissioners from health and from financial services. And we are pleading during that occasion for a pan-European framework, legal framework on the right to be forgotten. I will end up with a philosophical thinking. In 1909, Blériot, a French aviator, on a little cuckoo crossed the channel. In 1969, Armstrong landed on the moon. Who could have imagined that in 60 years, which may short long or long or short, the man would be on the moon? Elizabeth Weatherpass told us this morning, and I was very amazed because it's 60 years, you show a slide where in India, with one shot of HPV vaccine, it would take 60 years to eradicate cervix cancer in India. I just hope that it will not take 60 years to have the right to be forgotten for all EU cancer survivors. Thank you.
Thank you, Francoise. Very interesting and inspiring, and maybe we'll have a chance to ask a couple of questions a bit later in the session. We're going to change the focus a little bit because, as Francoise was saying, this campaign she's been running on financial discrimination and making sure that insurance companies don't have power over cancer survivors' future is one aspect of the survivorship question. But we're very interested in talking about some of the day-to-day issues here in Sweden that are faced by cancer patients and survivors, and to talk through those. And to do that with us, I'm sure you know Therese Leijon, who's the Secretary of Young Cancer Sweden, and Pia Watkinson, who is the Secretary of Cancerrehabfonden Sweden. How was that?
Very good.
Tack, tack. So, what we're interested in chatting through now are some of the issues that you ladies face on a day-to-day basis with the great work that your organisations do.
Yes.
Let's start with you, Therese.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. Is this working? Nope. Slides? Nope. Okay, I'll start with a story from one of our members. We work with adolescents and young adults, 16 to 30 years old. This is a woman, 31 years old. She said, when I was told I have cancer, the doctor said, you can die in 10 minutes. My first thought wasn't, oh, I have to contact the Social Insurance Agency or the Swedish Board of Student Finance to report that I'm sick. A lot of things happened, and my mom later helped me report my illness to the Social Insurance Agency. She then wrote the date when I got sick, even though it was now 2 weeks later. About a week after my surgery, when I was moved to a rehab center because of complications after my surgery, I was paralyzed and I couldn't speak. I received a call from a caseworker at the Social Insurance Agency. She questioned why I hadn't reported my illness the first day I got the message. I told her that it didn't come to mind when I was first diagnosed because I thought it was a death sentence. Her reaction was, but you're too young to have cancer. Maybe you misunderstood them. Then she proceeded to ask me if I was really too sick to work. I was completely dumbfounded when she said that because I was in a rehab center with a 13-centimeter long incision on my head after the surgery. I was partially paralyzed and still struggling to speak, which she didn't consider at all. I've never felt so abused, questions, and met with disbelief, as if I would make a joke about having cancer. So I'm from the Swedish organization called Young Cancer, Ung Cancer. And we are an organization for 16 to 30-year-olds, cancer survivors, or people who have family members, siblings, friends, or other important people surrounding them who've got cancer. And we offer 4,300 members, psychosocial support, peer-to-peer support, rehabilitation, financial aid, information, and we work on advocacy. And, oh, quote. Can I do this? No. Okay. So,
Nu kom det.
Tack. So the needs of young adults with cancer. The needs of young adults with cancer are different from many other age groups. I mean, our members are just on the verge of starting their life. They might have just started studying, moved away from home, fell in love, got their first job. They're no longer kids, but they're not really adults. We've just conducted a needs assessment to understand the real needs of this group. And we talked a lot about quality of life and what needs there are here today. And our assessment shows that 62% ranked the need for professional psychological support as high to moderately high. 33% would have wanted professional psychological support, but was not offered it. 63% ranked the need for physical rehabilitation as high. And 54% says that it would have wanted adapted information about what would happen to them next, especially among issues surrounding fertility. So, and we see a range of negative consequences, which is on the same topic, but it's mainly about financial inequalities, discrimination, and the lack of rehabilitation. So there is some risk for many of our members not to qualify for sick pay according to Swedish social insurance policies, which has led to that many end up in financial difficulties. 66% have used savings and 29% have moved back to their parents, if they're able to. So the late effects have impact on both work and private life, and we need to start the discussion regarding what actually are the consequences and what is quality of life. It will differ in between the group that Pia will just talk about. It will differ if you're a child when you have cancer, if you're older, or if you're young. So let's start the topic about what really is quality of life and how to move on from there. Pia.
Thank you. Let's see if my slides work. Is it the green one?
Yes.
Otherwise, I'll have to improvise. Should I just wait, or? Well, I represent a small NGO called Cancerrehabfonden. We're very small. We are completely something happening here. Completely financed by private donations. So we are a fundraising organization. Here we go. We've been doing this for 40 years, and in the last 10 years under the name Cancerrehabfonden. This is a short explanation about our organization. What we do is we're 5 staff in the office, and we raise money to send individuals who have had cancer, any cancer diagnosis, to go away for 5 days, different places, different locations in Sweden, where they get professional help based on 3 main subjects, which I would say the main one is that we have professional psychologists who help them with the mental anxiety and fear of is the cancer going to come back, or how long am I going to live, and all these psychological issues. And we also talk a lot about nutrition and physical activity. I always say that what we offer is not, of course, any universal solution to what rehabilitation is. There are lots and lots of different things that different individuals need. We have about 500 people a year that we can send for these weeks. Each group is about 15 people. I think from what we see in the, they all fill out a form when they come back with the assessment of the week, and we ask them what they think. And we have very, very high ratings. Many of them say that the issue of feeling very much alone has been very strong for them. Swedish cancer treatment, as we have heard, is a very, very high level, and they are very, very happy with their treatment. But many of them describe that when they leave the hospital, they feel like they've been thrown into a void. And I think that one should not, it's not negligible, is that a word? The feeling of feeling very alone. These individuals describe to us how, when they come home to their families, the family is so happy that mom or dad is home and has survived, and these individuals don't want to burden their families with these feelings, so they keep it very much inside their head. And I really do think that there is a big difference between the physical rehabilitation and the psychological rehabilitation. What we see in our group is that it's very much in the mind and the wanting to talk to others who know what it's like and what it feels like. And in these assessments that they fill out afterwards, they write beautiful quotes like, well, two of them are here, but they very often say that they've made friends for life. And they keep in touch on Facebook and groups. And I should also mention that we have over 90% women. And I'm, thinking a little bit about the different sessions that I've listened to today. Ulrika Årehed-Kåkström talked about the different levels of socioeconomic status, and I think I can see in the applications that come to us that these women are not in the high level. They are working as, in the low-income bracket. And another session I listened to today was about how it's very hard to understand sometimes what you get, the information that you get from the doctors, and they don't really understand, and when do they get the information. And I think a lot of this connects because, in the Swedish health legislation, you have the right to be offered rehabilitation. But when we ask them, were you offered rehabilitation when you left the hospital, in our statistics, that 4 out of 5 say no. And as I'm sure you all know that in Sweden we also have 21 different local health regions, and that differs a lot in the country. So they feel very much left to their own devices when they've left the hospital. And I think even if sometimes they have been given information from the hospital, but it's, sometimes it's at the wrong moment. They leave the hospital and they give you sometimes they say they give me a bunch of brochures leaving the hospital, and you're sort of not mentally prepared to grasp it at that point. And as Therese mentioned, I have a different age group in my patients, so to speak. They are 50, 55 upwards. So Therese and I communicate a lot because occasionally we have an application from somebody who is under 30, when I will recommend that they will be more comfortable with Ung Cancer. Time out, yes.
Well, I was going to ask you a couple of questions because it is World Mental Health Day, and we'll be hearing more about that later. And you've both touched on, in your presentations, the oncology, the psychosocial aspect of this. 2 quick questions for both of you. How do you think the patients that come to you feel about the support they've been offered in the psychosocial area? Have they been offered? Is it common to be offered? Are they satisfied with what they've been offered? And second question, how do you and your teams cope? How do you and your teams cope with meeting cancer patients who are probably in some form of distress or other? How do they cope? And how do you cope?
Do you want to start, Therese?
One of the main reasons why people come to us, we have a wide range of different diagnoses among our members. They need the surrounding of other people in the same age. Of course, it's different to combine with someone who's 62 years old and have a two adult kids, or if you've just been told that you never will be able to have kids. You have to talk about that in a different way. So the well-being, and especially after the cancer treatment, is often lowered. I have an example from a member who called me yesterday and said that she was fired because she was she was on sick pay half of her time, and they said you won't be able to cope with this work, which is not legal, but there were ways around it. So I mean, it's over 60% who say that the mental issues after the cancer treatment, and that goes a long way. And the long-term effects of especially young adults surviving cancer, not only being kids, but young adults, need to be taken seriously. And we have psychological support for everyone who works at the organization for free.
Well, as I mentioned, in our case, 4 out of 5 say that they have not been offered anything at all when they left the hospital. Sometimes maybe they have, but they haven't realized it at the moment. But they claim that they have not really been offered anything. As to coping, I have to say I'm so, impressed by the people that I meet. I talk to these participants in our groups quite often, and I'm very impressed by how strong they are and how they fight and how they want to live. So I take strength from them.
Well, it's super impressive, and thank you for all of the work that you do. It's really inspiring stuff. And Francoise, I wanted to ask you just to finish up about you've been doing a sort of different kind of activity with a bunch of politicians, right, and policymakers. What's been the biggest challenge and the biggest surprise in the work that you've done? You showed the 6 parliaments, the 6 countries where the right to be forgotten is enshrined in law. To get to that point, where must have been huge challenges and surprises and arguments and stuff. How did you go through all those?
I did not achieve all of these alone, but by working together with patients' organization, with physicians. Although I agree with your statement that the system of cancer care in hospital is so much complex and stressed that it is the last thinking of an oncologist when the patient gets out to think about rehabilitation and so on. They are overwhelmed with current patients to treat and to potentially cure, that they are far away from long-term rehabilitation and so on. So, well, it's persistent determination, finding the good contact. It's a nice and a good cause. Nobody can argue against, except insurance company. So you have to be persistent and rely on patient testimony. I think patient testimony is really important.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for sharing all of your experience and your journey and good luck with the future in your work. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Francoise and Therese and Pierre. Thanks very much.
And you, Mike, you will be here for the coming session as well.
You're getting your money's worth out of me. Yes, I'm happy to stay here, Pernilla. I'll do what I'm told. Okay, and my friend Norbert is going to join us, I think.
He's out there.
He's there.
Yeah.
Are you there, Norbert?
Yes. Hi, Mike. Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me well from Brussels.
Ah, there he is. Oh, you wore a tie, Norbert. This is Norbert Couepel, who is my colleague at the European Cancer Organisation. He doesn't normally look that smart, to be honest. He's in He's in our Brussels office, and he unfortunately couldn't travel here today, but he's in charge of our policy research, and he's in charge of our EU-funded projects, and he's with me to talk about the European Cancer Pulse. Maybe before we get into the slides, we've heard a lot today about inequalities, and I was in Bulgaria last week, and I was there to talk about HPV vaccination. Now, in Bulgaria, only 4% of girls, I think it is, have HPV vaccination. And if you think about Elisabeta's presentation earlier, where I thought that was a fantastic slide, Elisabeta, with the 75 to 100% of preventable or cancers that we can do something about, we know what to do. Cervical was right up there. Of course, cervical is not the only cancer to be caused by HPV, but we could do a lot if we could get HPV vaccination rates up in both girls and boys. Anyway, Bulgaria, 4%, terrible. And I had a meeting with people in the Deputy Prime Minister's office, and one of the women there said to me, Mike, before you go, I've got to tell you about my appointment with my GP with my 13-year-old daughter to go and get an HPV vaccination. And the GP said, are you really sure you want this? This is a GP saying to someone, trying to put them off. Then there was another lady that I met while I was there, and she was telling me a story about how a doctor had told a woman who was struggling to get pregnant that it was probably because she'd had the HPV vaccination. These are healthcare professionals that need to be educated and trained. And there are a lot of good family doctors in Bulgaria that we met that want to change this huge inequality. This is a massive inequality that exists in a preventable cancer. It's a no-brainer to have the vaccination, and yet here we are in 2023 in another part of the European Union with 4% vaccination rates. There's something wrong. Now, to be able to know that there's something wrong, you need the data. And as Elisabeta was showing, when you've got the data, you can see where the inequalities are. You can see where the problems lie. Then it's up to policymakers like the WHO, like the European Union, like national governments to make the decisions about what to do next. Now, oftentimes, this data is presented in a way that's not so easy for people like me to understand. People who are not healthcare experts, people who are not academics, to understand. So what we've been doing is we've created something which is public-facing on cancer inequalities called the European Cancer Pulse, and Norbert's in charge of it. And this European Cancer Pulse, which you can find on europeancancerpulse.org, is a public-facing tool to show inequalities in cancer. And we're going to launch the second version at our summit in November. So if we can go to the slides, perhaps, I can tell you a little bit more about it. Oh, double Norbert on the screen. What a treat. We can see you twice there, Norbert.
This is highly concerning.
Can we have a look at the slides? Okay, there's one slide there. All right. So we know that there are huge inequalities across Europe, and we know that part of Europe's Beating Cancer Plan was and the Cancer Mission is the establishment of a cancer inequalities registry, which is very helpful because it compares the data from the EU 27 countries from official sources. But the European Cancer Pulse is trying to do something that complements that because the Cancer Inequalities Registry is for comparable data in all 27 EU countries. So there's other data that exists on some issues which doesn't get included. So the European Cancer Pulse is designed to complement that. And in June we had a meeting in our office with representatives of DG RTD, DG Santé, the WHO, ESMO, ASCO, a large number of organisations, to try and see how we can make the European Cancer Pulse, which was launched last November, even more important as a source of comparing data. And of course, timely data is extremely important in public decision making. We saw this, didn't we, during COVID in a big way. And the war in Ukraine as well has demonstrated the importance of having data. So this opportunity here in the European Cancer Pulse is open to any organisation that has data on something related to cancer inequalities. This is not the European Cancer Organisation creating the data. It is a hub of data that can be used, and if you and your organisation are aware of data that's not included, we'd love to hear from you. We've also found that this data visualization tool, as it is, can help people see for themselves what the differences are between countries and within countries. And it includes non-EU countries as well. It includes areas of the cancer pathway and cancer policies. It includes all determinants of inequalities in cancer and all the data sources we can get our hands on. And the idea of this is that we can demonstrate that there's a problem, where there's a problem, in layman's terms, in terms that members of the public and their politicians and their parliamentarians can understand. Okay. So this is, this is the number of countries, 34 countries, 120 data measurements, 20 inequality categories, and that's what it looks like when you go into it, those different inequality categories. You can see the social inequalities on the right-hand side: age, education, income, gender, LGBTQI community, rural and urban differences, ethnicity. We're going to do some work on ethnicity starting at our summit in November. Other marginalized groups, the impact of COVID on cancer, and the impact of war in Ukraine on cancer. And on the left-hand side, you can see cancer burden, cancer prevention, screening and early detection, diagnosis, treatment, survivorship and quality of life that we've just been talking about, access, research, literacy, and cancer spending and policy initiatives. So there's a lot of different categories in the Pulse, and there's a video here to tell you more, which I hope we can play.
The quality of cancer care you receive can vary greatly between countries, but even within the same country, different patients are getting different levels of care. But how would you ever know? Now, there's a quick and easy way to find out. Called the European Cancer Pulse, this new online tool allows you to compare essential resources from 34 countries. From Estonia, Germany, and Portugal to Romania, Switzerland, Norway, and virtually everywhere in between. More countries and more different types of data than anything else now available. Here you can discover a country's cancer research budget, its number of scanners per 100,000 inhabitants, the public's health literacy on cancer prevention and risks. You can learn the level of cancer care people receive based on their age, education, income, and gender. The European Cancer Pulse shines a bright light on the inequalities between countries and within countries. With more than 120 different measurements, this new tool helps identify where people working together can improve cancer care in Europe. And it's now all at your fingertips.
No, I didn't mean to do that. Right. Okay, Norbert. Oh, yeah, just before we hand to Norbert. Parliamentarians. We've got this group called National and European Parliamentarians for Cancer Action. Because what we see in our work is a bit of a disconnect between the politicians in Brussels and the politicians in national capitals. So we've created this group. It's going really well. It's got a number of national and European parliamentarians within it. And they love data. They love being able to say, we've got this information from this country on this inequality. So if you know any parliamentarians who are strong advocates for action on cancer, please let us know, because we would love to include them in this group. And I've mentioned a couple of times already our European Cancer Summit on the 15th and 16th of November, where we'll be launching 2.0 of European Cancer Pulse. Norbert.
Thank you very much, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. Actually, Mike, I might need a little bit of assistance from here, as I actually can't see the slides. So I will present blindly, and I will trust you to help me maybe move the slides and help me talk to what's on the screen, hopefully. So if we can go to the next slide maybe and look at the 2023 activities. So indeed, Mike was mentioning that the European Cancer Pulse, as we are presenting it now, is really what we launched last year in November at our European Cancer Summit 2022. And now I can see the slides. That's great. So thanks a lot for that. But really, we were keen to further develop the tool. This was very much of a beta version, what we launched last year. And we were very honored and delighted to hear all of the support we were getting from the cancer community on this first version. And so this year, with the help of many of our partners and of important experts, such as Mark Lawler from Queen's University Belfast and Thomas Hofmarker from the Swedish Institute of Health Economics, I've been working on a bit of a plan to really take the European Cancer Pulse to the next level and help it support and foster what we really feel strongly about, which is data-based cancer policy. So we have a few topical strands we have been exploring this year, and I will be telling you a little bit about each of them. First element is a European Cancer Pulse 2.0 that Mike was mentioning already a few times. So really taking the tool itself to the next level. But then the tool itself is only a platform to actually do something with the data, but the data is really not the end product, but the end product is actually change for patients and for cancer professionals across Europe. And so we have identified a few areas where we felt able to actually do something concrete this year. And these are in particular social inequalities in cancer, the impact of social determinants on cancer care and cancer outcomes, the cancer workforce crisis as well, which we know is very much of a reality now already across Europe. Cancer screening, as we know, there's new policy in place at European level, but the gap to implementation very much needs to be filled. And bringing everything together, really trying to energize cancer policy for the next decade or so. So this is the sense of what we are calling a manifesto, which will also be released at our summit. And so to do this, the components are always the same. It's, of course, about data, as data is the start of this work, and we really think that data can be the basis of a lot of tangible action. But also very importantly, and I'm sure it was mentioned a lot during the day, it's about convening stakeholders, convening the expert community. As by ourselves, we won't go far. And as Mike was mentioning, the Pulse is very much a community tool. It's not the European Cancer Organization's tool. It's really a tool for the entire cancer community to actually amplify and collaborate around data to impact policy. Of course, it's about actual policy and actual campaigning, and we are working on this on a range of topics. And of course, developing the tool itself is also very much part of the effort. If I can have the next slide, please. So first element of what we call a European Cancer Pulse 2.0 when it comes to additional data. So we are updating the tool, and we are working in particular to add all of the very important initiatives that have been happening this year, meaning, for instance, the OECD cancer country profile, which have been launched, work by our colleague Mark Lawler, Richard Sullivan, and many others on the Lancet Oncology European Grant Commission, talking very much to the inequalities in cancer research activity across the continent. Also a lot of work that IARC has been doing. We're working closely with IARC on that, and many others, of course. As mentioned, it's very much about collaboration. And so we are keen to collaborate with organizations to help them use the Pulse as a platform to amplify their great work when it comes to exemplifying a certain inequality. And so an example of that, and you can see a picture from the Bucharest Fair, has been the European Parliamentary Forum for Sexual and Reproductive Rights about HPV. And Mike was mentioning HPV just before about Bulgaria. And this is indeed an area in which we are very active as an organization. And so EPF has worked on an HPV prevention atlas, which is about finding a measurement of how advanced different European countries are when it comes to HPV prevention. So from vaccination to screening to treatment to information. This is completely adapted to the European Cancer Pulse. It's exactly comparing countries with each other about their advancement of cancer policy. And so this is something we have been helping EPF to do and amplifying through the Pulse, and also help launch in the Romanian Parliament there. And you might see Mike on the right-hand side presenting the atlas. And of course, we are all the time issuing calls for data, reaching out to national authorities, to EU-funded cancer projects, we know, to really help the Pulse become this platform for the entire European cancer community to amplify their great work. Next slide, please. Convening, as Mike was mentioning, is very important, and you can see here more detail about this high-level hybrid expert workshop we have been holding about the European Cancer Pulse in June in our offices in Brussels. So you can see some of the people on the left-hand side and some of the names. So as you can see, a strong representation from the European Commission, the WHO, IARC, the OECD, several important pan-European medical societies, also ASCO and EU-funded projects. And what we really wanted to do was to kind of root this work on data on as much as possible on a high-level consensus on how to actually measure cancer inequalities. And we know this is a long-lasting debate about what are the right indicators to measure cancer inequalities. But we really think that day of discussion was very important, and we received a lot of support from all of these very important organizations for the project during that day. And so we are at the moment working on the report from that workshop, which will be launched again at the summit this year, really trying again to help generate this expert consensus on how to quantify and how to act against cancer inequalities. Next slide, please. Or you can have a next slide. Thank you. Oh, yeah, if we can go back a few. And one more, perfect. Thank you very much. So when it comes to policy and campaigning, so obviously this is what we are doing as an organization a lot. We're really a policy-focused organization. But one of the tools which we want to develop through the European Cancer Pulse are these country reports. So you can see an example on the right-hand side here about Slovakia, which is the first country report we have been developing. This is really aiming to be a very visual, simple representation of the key data from the Pulse about a country. Mike was mentioning this about the importance of having something which is easy to communicate, and easy to grasp and to understand. And this is really what we believe is essential to be able to influence policy, which is in the end the outcome of this work. And so we have devised this sort of template for representing the key data we can have for every country when it comes to cancer care. So this is obviously a selection of what we have on the European Cancer Pulse. There's much more, but we are displaying how the country is doing on prevention, taking tobacco, alcohol, and HPV as examples. We are displaying the latest data we know about the cancer screening coverage, which is also very important. Obviously, we are looking at diagnosis and treatment when it comes to the cancer workforce, but also the equipment and the investment in the system about that. We are looking at survivorship and quality of life. So back to Dr. Meunier's advocacy work and her great work she has been doing on that, whether this country has implemented or not the right to be forgotten in the law. And we saw, for instance, for Slovakia, this is not the case. Also looking at national cancer spending. So how is this country investing in its cancer care? And finally, at national cancer initiatives, does this country have a national cancer plan, for instance? We know that although there is a Europe-splitting cancer plan, unfortunately, many European countries still don't have today an up-to-date national cancer control plan, which is, of course, a great barrier to any action when it comes to cancer policy. So we are working If I can have a previous slide again, please. So we are working on publishing these reports, and every time this is really about collaborating with local stakeholders. All of these reports will be available on the Pulse 2.0, and you can see the names of the countries which are in consideration for this year. Next slide, please. And so when it comes to developing our tools, so this is also something that will be launched at our summit, so be ready for that. So we are going to really expand the tools functionalities. It will be about being able to directly compare countries in a very visual way, and this is really about using the Pulse as a way to benchmark individual countries' progress when it comes to cancer policy. We are supportive as an organization of goals when it comes to cancer policy, things such as reaching a tobacco-free generation, achieving HPV cancer elimination, but we are keen to benchmark how countries are doing when it comes to achieving these goals, and we think the Pulse will be a key element of that. Next slide, please. So just to talk briefly to some of these topical areas I was mentioning in terms of what we are doing when it comes to specific policy areas. So social inequalities is an element. We know that there's some good work going on in the community when it comes to socio-economic determinants of cancer care and cancer outcomes. But obviously, historically marginalized communities in cancer have not been really addressed so much, as we know this is very difficult to actually obtain data and push for policy change on that. But we think it's very important to look at that, and so things such as the LGBTQI+ community, ethnicity, or rural-urban differences are very important, and so we'll be working on that. Next slide, please. Another element, very quickly, is the cancer workforce crisis. So again, really a challenge of today, and we know that we are facing already a shortage of health workers and cancer workers in the system, and that will only increase. And so we are at the moment preparing a pan-European advocacy campaign on that, which includes some work on data, especially on cancer workforce shortages and working conditions issues. Next slide, please. And finally, cancer screening is also an important area. So we know that at European level, there have been new recommendations being published by the EU to advance cancer screening in country. But again, between what happens in Brussels and what happens at the national level, we know, and I'm sure this was discussed heavily during the day, that there's frequently quite a lot of difference. And so we are keen to help on that through also a pan-European advocacy campaign on that for national events. And a part of this will be for the European Cancer Pulse, creating what we call a cancer screening implementation index. Again, benchmarking countries on what they are doing when it comes to cancer screening policy. Next slide, please. And the final bit is about the manifesto. So I was mentioning this. This is, again, something that will be launched at the European Cancer Summit. So stay posted for more information then. But this will be about really maintaining a political campaign throughout next year and creating an interactive campaign that the whole cancer community can agree on and can support when it comes to keeping a strong EU policy agenda on cancer in the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide, please. So this is really a call for all of you to work with us around this project, the European Cancer Pulse, which we hope can be really useful to all of you. This is, as Mike said, really an open platform, so any organization can submit data for amplification through the Pulse. We have also our focus topic networks at the European Cancer Organization, which are all platforms for multi-stakeholder collaboration and to work on our connected projects when it comes to workforce screening or inequalities, for instance. Next slide, please. And finally, this is about our European Cancer Community Foundation, which is something that was launched recently this year also by ECO, which is also going to be related to this work when it comes to promoting and supporting local projects from grassroots organizations on the ground to address the issues that we can see through the research. And you can see the first call for grants has been launched recently, which is the Rising Star Grants. So that will be it from me. Back to you, Mike, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Norbert. That was great. And yeah, 15th and 16th of November, we're going to be launching our manifesto for the European Parliament elections, getting candidates to sign up. We'd love you all to sign up to our manifesto. Workforce crisis being something that I think affects every country and we'll be really focusing on. So from Norbert and me, thank you very much for your attention and look forward to working with you on the European Cancer Pulse.